Drop, there we go, your name and your location in the chat, just so we can get to know you guys a little bit. All of the resources that we share throughout this webinar and in the chat will be shared after as well through an email follow-up. And at any point, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We are going to have two question and answer sessions, one after we talk about the bills, and then one after we talk about ways to get involved. So we'll hopefully get through everybody's questions. Next slide, Jess. So, really quickly, some things to know about the 2026 General Assembly. First of all, it's 2026. So, because this is an even numbered year, this means that we have a long legislative session. It is 60 days, starting in mid-January and going through mid-March. As always, the General Assembly meets physically in Richmond, but there are lots of opportunities to get involved virtually, as well as options to view and testify at committee hearings remotely. As far as the lineup, there is a Democratic majority in both the House of Delegates and in the Senate. The House of Delegate margins are pending some special elections, but we do know that there is a majority in both chambers. Next slide. And like I said, lots of opportunities for you to get involved. We'll talk again a little more about these at the end of the webinar, but these are some of the highlights. There are always constituent meetings with your legislators. If you're interested in doing that, if you have a topic you're interested on that we're going to talk about during this webinar, reach out to us and we can help you schedule a meeting. There are several upcoming lobby days where you can lobby in a group if that's something you're more comfortable with, all throughout the end of January and beginning of February. And if you don't want to make the trek all the way to Richmond, you can take action by sending emails, writing letters, calling the legislative offices, and you can be alerted to that through our action alerts, which we send out regularly to make sure people are staying involved and informed. And I will pass it over to Peter.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, folks. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. My name is Peter Anderson. I'm our Director of State Energy Policy. Welcome. I'm going to kick us off with kind of a high-level overview before passing the mic to some of my colleagues. So in 2026, this is sort of our big picture outline of what we're going to cover this evening on the webinar, but we are prioritizing our continued transition to a clean energy economy throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're also going to be talking about some common sense safeguards around the growth of data centers in Virginia, not just for Northern Virginia anymore. Speaking of regional concerns in Virginia, one of the roles that Appalachian Voices frequently plays is ensuring that not all of the conversation is centered around the urban crescent of Nova, Richmond, and Hampton Roads, and making sure that Southwest Virginians' priorities are top of mind for legislators as they take their seats. And then finally, if you've been following our organization, you know for a long time we've been advocating for no new investments in methane gas infrastructure. So we're going to talk about some of the safety standards regarding gas pipelines. But without further ado, I will hand the microphone to my colleague, Matt.
Thanks, Peter. Matt Allenbaugh. I'm the Virginia Campaign Coordinator, and I'm based in Roanoke. In 2020, Virginia passed major legislation to reduce carbon emissions and shift to a 100% clean energy economy by mid-century with the Virginia Clean Economy Act. However, powerful fossil fuel interest groups would like to weaken or repeal Virginia's landmark clean energy policy. And every year, bills are introduced that would do just that. This year is going to be no exception, and we anticipate seeing quite a few bills over the next few weeks aimed at doing so. Two that I'll highlight this evening are Senate Bill 40. This bill eliminates a provision that makes Virginia's clean energy standard enforceable. These are known as deficiency payments, and they're the penalties that they're the penalties for electric utilities not meeting their renewable energy portfolio standards. And Senate Bill 69. This bill repeals provisions of law that require the regulation of carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. It would also eliminate barriers to building new polluting power plants and to get rid of policies encouraging clean energy development. January 23rd is the last day that new bills will populate on LIS, so some of the bills aimed at weakening Virginia's clean energy laws won't be available well into the second week of the session, so stay tuned. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Peter.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for the reminder. You're going to see some slides in our presentation tonight that are full of placeholders in terms of bill numbers. We're kind of doing this webinar a week earlier than we normally do. So a lot of the bills have not been published with their bill numbers yet. You can go online and search lis.virginia.gov is what Matt was referring to, and see the bills that have been published so far. There's maybe a few hundred bills out there, but we're going to end up with several thousand bills over the next couple of weeks that getting filed. Anyways, we're here to help you distill down and pay attention to the important ones. So speaking of important ones, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about our approach to data center development. It's been getting a lot of attention the last couple of years, in the headlines, in our communities, in the legislature. Not a lot has been done by the Virginia General Assembly. Other than way back in 2010, before the topic was on anyone's mind, the General Assembly created a tax incentive to bring more data centers to the Commonwealth. Well, it worked. They're here. So anyways, now we're dealing with, communities are dealing with the impacts of a lot of that type of development in Virginia. So this slide is just an overview of kind of four basic areas that we focus on when we think about data center development. We think about consumer protection and what does it cost? I mean, some of these companies are very successful, very wealthy, large companies. They use a lot of our electricity. And what impact does that have on all electric utility ratepayers, us, anyone who pays an electric bill? Are our bills going up, and what can we do to mitigate that? A lot of folks rightfully are concerned about transparency when new projects are proposed in their communities, and they're trying to find information out about that. And a lot find that it's hard to get clear information about some of the new project development, and so we want to address that. It's generally state oversight. This is an industry that is having an outsized impact, and it is largely unregulated. Pretty much the only permits these facilities have to get are at the local siting permit. In some counties, some places, some of the development is even by right, so they don't even need that. So I think some proper oversight is necessary for such a large and impactful industry. And then finally, back to that state tax incentive I mentioned to kick off. If we're going to incentivize behavior, the industry showed up. It's time to reform that tax incentive to shape responsible development using clean energy. So let's head to the next slide, and I'll get a little bit more detail on each of these ideas. So a lot of these bills that App Voices is supporting are bills that we worked on in previous legislative sessions that didn't quite make it across the finish line. And so these are the first bill here. There was a similar bill last year that Senator Perry and Delegate Maldonado ran. They're bringing the concept back this year. And this is really about that fairness about who pays, right? So we all think that data centers should pay their own fair share for the electricity infrastructure they're using, and not make us pay for their infrastructure on our electricity bills. So that's what this first bill at the top of the page is about, really just making sure that State Corporation Commission pays close attention to that issue and ensures that data centers are paying their fair share and we are paying our fair share. The second bill I'm highlighting on this page is a new bill this year about demand flexibility. There's been studies that have shown a lot of new infrastructure could come online without requiring any new power plants to be built if we shift some of our electricity use off of the time of what's called peak demand. And since data centers use so much electricity, and drive those peaks up. There's been a lot of thought lately about how to maybe schedule some of their use of the electricity grid to a time that is away from the peak of demand, which would relieve some of the need to build new infrastructure. Ultimately, if we're avoiding building new infrastructure, that's saving us money. That's keeping our bills from going up even more. Next slide. So this is the transparency issue I mentioned before. There were a couple of transparency bills last year. One of them was passed by the General Assembly, but was vetoed by the governor. So legislators are coming back for more attempts at transparency. There is a bill concept floating out there that has not been filed yet, that is about preventing non-disclosure agreements from being used to conceal important information from data center applicants, like how much water they use. And then Delegate Shelley Simons, this is the second bill. She had a bill last year on this topic that she's modifying and bringing back this year, also focused on how much water data centers use and ensuring that in the aggregate, the Virginia's Department of Environmental Quality has an understanding of how much water that sector is using. So, and making sure that that information is publicly available. Next slide, please. This bill from Delegate Josh Thomas is also there was a similar bill filed on this topic last year that he's returning to work on. And this is a basic oversight by our electric utility regulator, the State Corporation Commission. As I mentioned before, data centers have a large impact because of their energy use, and as you know, many other impacts related to land and water and air. But this kind of the concept behind this bill is if we're building a facility that uses potentially as much energy as a whole new power plant would generate, shouldn't we be looking at whether or not to plug that new that source of electricity demand into the grid in the first place? The State Corporation Commission, the regulator of the electric utilities, should know best. So the concept here is that they would take a look at, whether there's a threat to reliability from plugging in a massive new data center, and if that would have an adverse impact on our bills and on our clean energy laws. So Delegate Thomas has been a real champion on this issue, and we continue to support his effort here. Next bill, please. Okay, and this is the tax incentive that I introduced before. So there have been efforts for the last, I guess this is the third year running now that Senator Deeds and Delegate Sullivan have worked on this issue. And it's really trying to make sure that tax exemption that data centers already get to use, it's very, very generous to not have to pay state sales tax when your company purchases really expensive chips for your data center. It's real money. This tax exemption has actually cost Virginians. We have foregone $1 billion in revenue in 2024 because of this tax exemption. So let's actually, the idea here is to actually incentivize good behavior. If a company is going to get to use this generous tax exemption, they should not take us backwards on our clean energy goals. They should operate efficiently and really trying to get away from the use of diesel generators for backup power. So this bill will continue to address that, and we support it. Next slide. And it's over to Matt.
Thanks, Peter. All across Virginia, folks are really feeling the strain of rising utility bills. After a recent ruling by the State Corporation Commission, customers of Dominion Energy will see their monthly bills increase on average by $11 starting this month. And Appalachian Power customers, like my family, are seeing average monthly bills that are almost $44 higher than in July of 2022. Energy efficiency is a great way to reduce costs, but it's not always available to everyone. Senate Bill 5 and House Bill 3 would establish an energy efficiency task force to identify barriers and prevent people from taking advantage of energy efficiency programs and weatherization services and recommend solutions. It would develop a plan and a budget to enable a significant increase in energy efficiency for low-income households across the Commonwealth. The General Assembly uh, passed bills similar to this last year with broad bipartisan support, but they were vetoed by Governor Youngkin. This year, the bills have been reintroduced and it will include more robust language that includes workforce development to make sure that we have a well-trained and ready energy efficiency workforce and specific recommendations for hard-to-reach demographics like folks who are renting or people living in manufactured homes. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Austin Counts.
Yeah, hey everybody. So my name is Austin Counts. I work with Appalachian Voices in our Norton, Virginia office, and I'm our Southwest Virginia Solar and Electrification Projects Manager. So of course, I'm here to talk with you about some of the solar energy bills that we're supporting this General Assembly. The very first is kind of an expansion on a program that we've been supporting in Southwest Virginia for a long time, that being the Appalachian Power Company's shared solar program. And so the bill that we're expecting this year is actually going to expand their existing program. After the program opened up just early last year, they have actually already hit their cap on capacity for the number of projects that can go through, that being 50 megawatts. Or if you're thinking about how many projects actually means, that really means around 10 projects throughout the area. And so that cap has already been hit within a year of the program opening up. And we're really excited to see an opportunity to expand that program to allow more solar projects to take place in the program and more Appalachian Power Company customers to be able to subscribe to more affordable solar energy. Additionally, we're looking at supporting the Distributed Generation Expansion Act, and this is an expansion on some things that were already lined out for the Virginia Clean Economy Act, namely the expansion of the requirement of small scale distributed solar required through the VCA. Small scale solar, as defined in the VCA, is anything under 3 megawatts or 3 megawatts or smaller. And so that could include things like shared solar, or it can include projects like solar panels on your local schools. And then finally, we want to see an expansion in the required generation capacity of solar on brownfields, mine lands, and other previously disturbed sites. This just goes to make sure that the sites that we're using kind of have the least amount of impact on other forms of land use. And so we want to make sure that there's a few more projects in the Commonwealth that's going on previously utilized sites rather than on fresh or working ecosystems. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Matt.
Thanks, Austin. So a key aspect of the clean energy transition is storing the energy produced during sunny or windy days for later use, such as in the evenings or at times of peak demand. The Virginia Clean Economy Act requires a modest development of battery energy storage, but recent developments, particularly in long duration energy storage that can store electricity for up to several days, make clear that the Commonwealth really needs to go farther. Modeling conducted by Ideasmiths in response to Dominion's 2024 Integrated Resource Plan has demonstrated that for much of Virginia, the projected increase in energy demand driven primarily by data centers can be met entirely with clean energy resources if we invest now in energy storage. Bills patroned are introduced by Delegate Sullivan and Senator Deeds this session will increase the short and introduce long duration battery energy storage requirements for Dominion in line with the Ideasmith modeling that I just mentioned, and for Appalachian Power Company as well. And I'll pass it to you, Peter.
Thanks so much, Matt. I can't wait for Virginia to become a leader in energy storage. And honestly, we actually already are. We've had the Bath County pumped hydro storage serving Virginians for like 50 years. We can talk more about that later. So I don't know how many folks are familiar with the phrase virtual power plants, but the concept of a virtual power plant is just basically like you've got a lot of small, batteries and devices that can manage electricity load, manage EV charging, smart thermostats, smart hot water heaters, where you can sort of either time your electricity use to a different time that's away from the peak, or you can actually store energy and use it later. These are the kinds of resources that can be managed like there's a good metaphor of like a conductor in an orchestra. So like we'd like to orchestrate some of these smaller energy resources through a software program. It's a lot of these tiny devices orchestrated en masse produces a real amount of capacity for the grid, and it's clean energy capacity we're talking about, things that don't emit pollution. So Dominion Energy, the largest utility in Virginia, got a bill last year creating a virtual power plant program, and it's quite a significant one that is being designed now. And speaking of not just focusing on the Dominion part of the state, but on the whole state, including southwestern Virginia, we're advocating that Appalachian Power Company also start engaging and publishing one of these programs for their customers to use at their own discretion. So something like this would be optional, and if folks have a home battery system or a smart thermostat or an electric vehicle and they want to get into a program like this, you could actually be compensated for letting your device be used by the utility, which helps the grid, helps you, but it would be entirely optional to the customer. Nobody would have to sign up if you just want to keep it to yourself. But we hope you'll share your clean energy with all of us. And then hand in hand with the program for Appalachian Power, many Virginians get their electricity from a electric cooperative, and the electric cooperatives we know are very interested in having a virtual power plant program as well. So we look forward to working with them and advancing these really smart policies to clean up our energy grid and manage load growth. Forget who I'm passing it to, but next slide.
It's me, Peter.
It's Jessica.
I'm Jessica Sims. I'm the Virginia Field Coordinator for Appalachian Voices, and I'm based in the Richmond area. And we know pipeline safety and pipeline oversight has been a very important issue to Appalachian Voices and many of the folks joining in tonight. And so in that multi-year approach, we've tried to and have successfully increased penalties for violators, required more stringent review of the plans needed for pipelines or those that are currently under construction, and have worked towards adopting safety measures that are related to methane pipelines in the state. Specifically intrastate pipelines, which is what our legislature has control over, and our State Corporation Commission. But to give a little bit of context for this bill idea that is out there, but as you can see has not yet been filed, does not have a bill number. But the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which is the federal agency under the Department of Transportation that manages exactly what their name says, all the millions of miles of pipelines in the US and hazardous materials that are traveling. So they come up with the rules and regulations for how those should be reported on and monitored. And they try to make improvements to those rules for things like leak detection and repair. And so that federal agency comes up with that set of necessary safety standards. And in Virginia, they work with our State Corporation Commission, who serves as sort of a partner to them to help manage the intrastate component of pipelines in Virginia. And so the SCC is able to look to PHMSA to the federal agency and say, what kind of standards should we have? So for the past couple years, PHMSA had been undergoing a rulemaking process. This meant they spent years working with stakeholders, including, impacted residents, people that work in the field, the industry, to come up with a really comprehensive list of improvements to be made as it relates to leak detection and repair for gas pipelines. They followed, each part of what that federal process is, and they came up with a very comprehensive list that was achieved through years of hard work and communication that was meant to be implemented nationwide. They got it to the point where it was to appear in the Federal Register, which is the last step for it to become public. But the Trump administration would not allow it to be published. And so you have this sort of body of work that made it all the way to being almost implemented. And then the current administration did not allow it to move forward. So what the bill that we're talking about tonight would hope to do is to look to what great information they came up with to improve standards, including requiring annual leak detection surveys, minimizing intentional methane emissions, improving reporting requirements, and improving procedures for reducing overall emissions. And it would ask our SCC to help develop regulations that are similar to what were in that rulemaking process. And this is something that other states are trying to do also at the same time. Colorado has moved forward with this, asking their Public Utilities Commission to basically do the same thing, to say we would have been following the federal rule anyways, were it not prevented from being in the Federal Register. We think it's important to have the highest safety standards that we can, and I think Virginia should be have the ability to have those safety standards too. So we hope for your support on this bill this year. We have reached the part of our program, the first Q&A session, where we take some questions specific to the bills. In the second half of tonight's program, we are going to go through all the ways you can advocate, and we'll take more questions about those processes too. Some of what folks have asked, we are answering a little bit in the chat, but I've got about 6 questions that we've cataloged here in the chat and in the Q&A. So I'm going to ask them and then turn it over to the panelists to give responses on those. The first question: has there been any push on requiring data centers to meet energy efficiency standards? The example they gave was, LEED certified buildings. Peter.
Yeah, Jess, I can answer that. The answer is yes. That is part of the bill that Delegate Sullivan and Senator Deeds have filed previously, and that will continue to be part of their bill this year. I believe LEED and several other energy efficiency, these are like technical engineering standards, were included in the bill last year. Yeah, short answer, yes. All of those facilities, if that bill were to pass, would have to meet those energy efficiency standards if they wanted to continue taking the generous tax exemption.
Thanks so much, Peter. We'll stay on data centers. They're a hot topic this evening. The next question is it possible to propose to legislators that the permits for data centers include a requirement to integrate clean energy generation on site within the architecture or landscaping of the facility?
I'll take that one again. I think, is it logically possible? Yes, of course it is. We could, Virginia General Assembly could pass a policy that says, every viable square inch of rooftop on a data center warehouse has a solar panel attached to it, or something like that, or uses geothermal HVAC system to power it, reducing its strain on the grid. We could do those things. Is there the political will to do those things? That's where the rubber hits the road. So we're trying to wade through those exact types of questions right now when in our advocacy. How far are legislators willing to push this industry, which has both brought a lot of financial benefits to the Commonwealth that they like, and also creates a lot of burdens for community members to bear and that their constituents don't like. And so balancing the interests of environmental protection, grid reliability, and clean and healthy environment, we think it's time for a win on the protecting communities side and on the protecting a clean and healthy environment side, because the industry has certainly won a great financial incentive for a long time. But yeah, whether they'll actually do it remains to be seen.
Thanks, Peter. This one might be for Austin or others. Why is there a cap on shared solar at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know fully how to answer it. Peter, do you want to take a stab at it, or should I go? I think you'd be able to answer better.
No problem, Austin. I'm happy to kick off, and if anything, feel free to supplement my answer. So shared solar, there are rules in the existing shared solar program that Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power already have under the current law, where the concern for our electric utilities is they are monopolies. You're not supposed to be able to go anywhere else. So like wherever you live, you're stuck with the electric service provider where you live, right? Shared solar is basically retail shopping. It's competition for the electric utility. And so there are rules attached to the existing program that basically say, okay, if you're going to subscribe to someone else's solar panels that your utility does not own, you're at least going to pay the utility for your use of the electric poles and wires that bring that energy from those solar panels to your house. So those are already contemplated in the law today. But yeah, the utilities have generally been opposed to the policy because it's adverse to their financial interests. It seems like losing a customer to them. So this is a negotiation that happens with lawmakers. The utilities would prefer you to just buy their power instead of buying it from some third party that has some solar panels.
Austin, did you want to go? I have a follow-up question to that too. And you're muted at the moment.
Thank you. I think I was just going to add that perhaps a way to think about the cap is that it's also at the same time a minimum that the utility is required to allow onto their system. And so while it is a cap in that that's the most developers, solar companies are able to put into that program, it's also the minimum that Appalachian Power is required to make available. Um, and so, Peter, am I wrong in saying like if they wanted to, they could go beyond 50 themselves? Like, Appalachian Power could allow more than 50 megawatts if they wanted to, but this is currently all that they're required to allow on the system.
Oh, Austin, I think you've stumped me. I'd have to pull up the law, read it.
No trouble.
But I'd always thought of it as a cap, as in it's no more than 50 megawatts today. So, Jessica, what was the follow-up question?
Follow-up. All right. Was the APCO solar cap only for shared solar or for all solar across APCO's territory?
Oh yeah, no, that's for the shared solar program. Sorry, I came off. I saw Austin come off mute. The Appalachian Power Company is required under a different part of the law, under the Virginia Clean Economy Act, to propose to acquire or build a certain amount of solar energy to serve their customers. That's a separate category than the shared solar program. The shared solar program is basically like you live in APCO territory, but you're buying your solar from me. Whereas the other part of the law, Appalachian Power themselves has to build a certain amount of solar to put on the grid for their customers.
We've got two more questions. Peter, you might what's the data center one said? Okay. And then a procedural question. That's a nice segue into our next segment. Does Delegate Thomas's bill allow the SCC to approve new fossil fuel plants if the plant complies with the VCEA only because of the quote reliability exception?
So, Jess, if you can go back to that slide on the Delegate Thomas bill, I realized what I did when I was presenting that slide. Here it is. I think I used the phrase threat to reliability, and that was a mistake on my part. If folks have been following our campaign in opposition to Dominion's Chesterfield gas plant, that whole construction of that approval of that gas plant has hinged on whether or not the SCC thinks that there's a threat to reliability without the gas plant. So I don't know if that's what the person who asked the question was thinking of when they asked it. But I didn't mean to confuse the issue. What Delegate Thomas's bill says is we're looking at the impacts on reliability of, like, if I interconnect this hyperscale data center, let's say it uses 1,000 megawatts of power, just one data center. That's one of the really big ones. It says we the regulator can decide whether or not to interconnect and put that high load facility online or not, or if doing so would maybe cause blackouts because we're just not prepared to serve that big of a new source of electricity demand. That's what I'm getting at reliability here. So it would be up to the SCC if this bill passed. The SCC would look at whether it's a 25 megawatt facility or a 100 megawatt data center or a 200 megawatt data center. The SCC would say, does that proposal put us at risk of, like, rolling blackouts? That's what they'll be looking at. It has nothing to do with whether gas would be serving the data center.
Thanks, Peter.
And then there's a separate part of that bill that says they won't approve interconnection of that data center if it would cause us to not comply with our clean energy and environmental laws.
Great, thank you. Briefly, we have a procedural question that I think, as someone who knows about rulemaking and regulatory advisory panels, you might be able to answer too. Have you been able to leverage the quote petition for making for relevant regulations and use the response to the quote petition for rulemaking from agencies and boards to advocate for legislative solutions? So this is talking about another process that can happen to implement change. And we received this question directly in our host inbox, if you need to see it there. But Peter, wonder if you have any thoughts of that, and then we will transition to the next part of our program, and we will keep answering questions directly in the chat.
Yeah. So I can say to the person asking the question, I've never used the petition process for an agency rulemaking. Most of the rulemaking, but we have participated in a lot of rulemaking processes before various state agencies like the State Water Control Board, the State Air Pollution Control Board, the State Corporation Commission. We've advocated in those fora before, but we have not used this process. Usually when we engage, it's because a law was passed that tells the agency to regulate something or to change a regulation. And so that's how we get involved. And it looks like from their question, they're asking about using this to advocate for legislative solutions. And I would say the normal process would be the reverse of that. You'd have a legislative solution that then, subsequent to that, a rulemaking process happens.
Great, thanks. And we'll just flag that someone did ask about balcony solar bill, and Matt has let them know there will be a balcony solar bill introduced this session. So please keep the questions coming in the chat. We will have another Q&A section at the end. But I am now going to pass it to the next speaker.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kara. I work as the New Economy Program Coordinator out of the Norton office. So that's in Southwest Virginia. And having always lived in the southwestern part of the state, I definitely recognize how intimidating and removed the Virginia General Assembly process can feel to people, whether that's geographically or otherwise. But one of our goals is to make sure that we're communicating ways to you all that folks in every part of the Commonwealth can connect to the process. So if we can go to the next slide, we can talk about some ways that we can get you all to join us and get involved. So perhaps the most important thing is to find who your legislator is. So I believe that my colleague Jen has just popped into the chat a link that you can follow that will prompt you to enter your address where you live in Virginia. And once you do that, it will give you a breakdown of who your representatives are. And a little bit later on, once we have all of these bill numbers, everything's been published, you'll be able to see what committees they serve on. You'll be able to see if they are patroning certain bills that you support or oppose. And that lets you kind of go to the next step, which is just to do your homework. So using this other link, the Legislative Information System, you can find bills, ones that maybe we've mentioned, or maybe ones that you're interested in yourself. You can find the bill numbers, the patron, and the information on the committees and the hearings for that bill. You can think about whether you support or oppose the bill. And then what I think is the most important part is thinking about how you will share your story. So there will always be experts to do this work. Laura, in the chat, you said that you needed a glossary for what we're talking about. I work here and I also need a glossary, but the most unique contribution that you can make to the assembly this year is your story and your appeal to the person whose job it is to represent you and do good by you and your community. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Emma.
Thanks. And I realized I did not introduce myself, even though I kicked off this webinar. So I'm Emma Kelly. I am the New Economy Program Manager in far Southwest Virginia, out of Lee County, if anybody knows where that is at. So once you have identified your state legislator, your delegates, your senators, you can call prior to the bill hearing in committee. Again, that is information you can find on the LIS website. Be prepared to leave a message or speak with the staff, depending on when you're calling during the day. Or if you feel very strongly, you can testify either in person in Richmond or virtually at the actual committee hearings. You'll need to know the bill number, and it would be great to know the patron, but that's a good way to get your voice officially on the record. Next slide, Jess. As I mentioned earlier, kind of at the beginning, there are also more remote options. You can email your legislator. That's a little bit more of an accessible option. You can submit a formal written comment to the committee. So Jen has just popped the link to do that into the chat as well. You do want to make sure that you're specific on what you're speaking on or writing on. So include the bill number and the patron information. You want to be clear, of course, about whether you support or oppose the bill. Talk about where you live, especially if your legislator is on the committee. They love to know if you're a constituent that makes them listen a little more closely. And talk about your story and how this bill would impact you. Give them that personal touch that makes them remember and think really strongly about what you're saying. Next slide. If you're looking to do something very specifically with this fun team, here are some options. You can take action with us, follow developments at the website that, again, Jen is about to pop in the chat as I say it. We send out action alerts. These are really rapid response comments to elected officials. So if we know that something is coming down the pipeline and we really want to reach out to the legislator and kind of hammer them with a message, that's what those priority action alerts are for. We are also hosting 3 Holler from the Hollers phone banking events, and we'll talk about those more on the next slide. Finally, our social media is going to be very active. You can share those action alerts. You can share our informative posts, making sure that everybody is educated and well aware of what is happening in General Assembly. Next slide. All right, so this is a quick calendar. If people want to screenshot, of course, we will be sending this out after, but these are some of the prime dates that we are preparing for. Coming up first is the Affordable Clean Energy Rally that is in person in Richmond. That is on January 21st. Just under a week later is the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Water Lobby Day, again in person in Richmond. Kara and I will be at that. A couple days later, there is the No New Gas Plant Lobby Day, also in person in Richmond. And then in the first week of February, the Virginia Conservation Network is leading their lobby day. So again, these sort of group lobby days are much more approachable options if you want to lobby but maybe haven't before. It's a great way to get into a group setting with a bunch of like-minded folks and kind of divide and conquer that way. Finally, on January 16th, January 30th, and February 13th, we are having our Southwest Virginia specific Holler from the Hollers. So the very first one is going to be on the APCO solar expansion bill that we talked about earlier. And we can either phone bank in person at our Norton office. We'll be buying pizza. It'll be a real grassrootsy fun gathering. Or we will have a virtual option if you don't want to drive into the Norton office. So keep your eyes peeled on our social media for those events as well. And I will pass it to Kara to facilitate the next Q&A.
Sure. We have 3 questions lined up, but please keep them coming. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. First of all, just shortly to answer what is Holler from the Hollers, it's basically just a cute, quirky name for what Emma described. So it's just an opportunity for folks specifically from Southwest Virginia to get together and talk about bills that impact their communities and, do it together because it can be an intimidating process to reach out to legislators. Really quickly, Jess, I'm wondering where can folks send follow-up questions if things are not able to be covered today? I saw that you dropped your email earlier in the chat.
Yeah, I think the panelists tonight can share their email in the chat, but you'll also receive that information as long as you registered for tonight in the follow-up. You'll have all of our info and can ask us direct questions throughout session.
Great. And then there was one specific question that sort of got touched on in the chat. Matt, I'm wondering if you might be willing to speak more about a balcony solar bill that will be introduced.
Yeah, I can touch on it very briefly. So, first I should probably explain what balcony solar is for folks. So, balcony solar or plug and play solar is a small off-the-shelf photovoltaic system that is small enough that you can, you put a couple of panels, in a sunny spot in your yard, and then it plugs directly into a receptacle in your house. You can think of it as an energy generating appliance. The bill that is being introduced this year, well, first, there's a number of states that have either introduced bills, or Utah was the first state to pass a bill, making this kind of legal statewide. There will be a bill introduced this year that would, I think the details are that it would allow for up to 1,200 watts of plug and play or balcony solar to be purchased off the shelf and then plugged into a receptacle. No interconnection agreements would be required with your utility company like Appalachian Power or Dominion. And you'd be able to, go to IKEA or Home Depot or wherever you purchase appliances and such, and acquire one of these devices, put it in a sunny spot, and start saving money. So I don't have the bill number in front of me, but I'd keep an eye out for it in the coming days or weeks.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. And I know that question was a little bit more of a policy question. We have a couple on lobbying. Jess, am I allowed to contact legislators that don't represent me? Question.
The preference is that you're contacting your own elected officials because they are really valuing what their constituents say. And when you're calling, oftentimes they're tallying that and they're reporting, whomever's taking your information is reporting that back to the staff in the office to say you've had constituents that are really upset about this issue. You may have an opportunity to speak to other elected officials, especially if you participate in a lobby day. Sometimes the groupings might be such that you're an issue expert or you're impacted by something and you're assigned with constituents. But it's also one thing to consider too is who are the folks that are on a committee. If it is, a smaller subcommittee and there's capacity to reach out to all of them to say, this is why this issue you're about to make a decision on matters to me. That's great too, but best to initially focus on your own elected officials.
Great. And if you're talking to legislators before they leave for Richmond, how would you prioritize what to say and how to start that conversation?
I'll kick this off just to say, what is the issue that is most pressing to your community in this moment? And expressing to them that they need to give that serious attention when they get there. Data centers have been a huge topic tonight. They're a huge topic everywhere. I think expressing things that are really important to your community and have urgency in impacting your community are items to focus on. I think it's also good to take a look at what they did last year. Did they get any bills through? Were any of them ones you liked? Or go into that meeting understanding where there might be a point you agree on or something that you'd love to see them bring back is another option. And I appreciate other folks' comments.
Yeah, I'll just say if your delegate or senator is on a committee that in a really important bill to you is going to be heard by, those are the most important conversations you can have because at that decision point, your senator, your delegate is going to have kind of the most impact on that bill moving forward, being amended, going to the full House or the full Senate, or if you oppose it, the possibility of having it kind of quashed in committee. So yeah, kind of in addition to what Jess said, highlight what's most important to you and your family and your community. And then if your senator or delegate is on a committee that's hearing a bill that's important to you, that's really the most important time to reach out.
Great. Would any other panelists like to weigh in on that question? All right, let's go ahead and move on to another policy question. This one might also be for Peter. What is Appalachian Voice's stance or your thoughts on the state doing a moratorium on data centers until more better legislation is built and regulated?
A couple of different thoughts in that question, because we're certainly advocating for better regulation of the industry and of the facilities. So I don't know that. First of all, I'm unaware of if any legislator is working on a moratorium bill. I also don't think that the political atmosphere in Richmond right now is such that a moratorium would pass the General Assembly and be signed into law. So regardless of whether I think it's a great policy or not, I think it's unrealistic for Richmond this year. You got to remember that a lot of communities have, well, not a lot of communities. Some communities have been able to lower their property taxes because of the revenues that data centers bring to their communities. Some of those same communities are also saying, okay, enough. We're happy to have low property taxes, but we're also starting to get annoyed with the noise and the diesel generators operating and all the rest. So it's a complicated issue. And I think what we want to do is we want to insist on, if data centers are going to be a major part of Virginia's economic development, which they already are, we want them to be good neighbors. And we want to insist, like, the minimum you can do is, not create a giant mess for us to clean up. right? Not make our lives worse as a result. So we want to hold them to some pretty high standards, and I think that's probably the best we can ask for right now. But I understand that nationally and in other states there are proposals for moratoria, and I'm following that closely and interested to see what decision makers do and see what communities do. You can already stop data centers right now in your own community just by getting your your county board of supervisors to reject their proposals.
Thank you, Peter. And we really only have time for about one more question. So, Jess, I'd like to pass it to you for closing, and also just to see if you have thoughts about a question in the chat on general advice for how someone is supposed to sort of sift through the hundreds and thousands of bills that end up on LIS and figure out what to support and what to oppose.
That's a great question. And we're seeing bills just pouring in each day. So there's so much to follow, but Appalachian Voices is here to help highlight some of the priority environmental protection bills and good governance bills and the policies that protect our air, our water, our land. So one resource, and I think this was shared in the chat, will be shared afterwards, our landing page is going to talk about our priority bills. And so many other groups across Virginia are coming up with their list of bills that they're most concerned about or excited for. And so take a look at our list, take a look at other groups' list. That's one way to narrow it down a little bit. Making sure you're connected with everyone's social media. So much of this is rapid response. It's really helpful to, as you have capacity, follow the social media pages of Appalachian Voices to know what's happening when committees are hearing, when there's a really quick decision point. There are a lot of coalitions working on different things. So I really am such a fan of the big lobby days because you meet a lot of great people. They set it up for you. It's fun. But you can also get a sense of what those priorities are too. And so I just want to mention there is, and I'll send it in follow up. We're not participating in this one, but there is a data center specific lobby day. There's also a day for all people. There's other environmental ones going on. So we can send a pretty comprehensive list. You can oftentimes get a list of sort of all the activities with Virginia Conservation Network has a page where they'll list all the lobby days too. But I think staying in touch with us, you heard about a lot of important policies tonight, and that's one way to narrow it down. Paying attention to what your own elected officials are putting in. You can sort an LIS by your legislator, and that's another way to see what they are doing and what could impact your community. So some suggestions there. But everything we talked about tonight is going to be sent to you as a follow-up material. We are here to help. So we're the GA team, very excited to have your participation in this. I'm going to stop sharing now as we are about to close the program. And we're just so thankful to all of you for making time to be here, taking your evening to spend with us. Also want to thank all of our panelists tonight and Jen Lawhorn, who's been helping us on the tech side and getting everything ready. I'm very grateful to you all. But want to ask panelists if anyone has any closing thoughts before we end tonight's program.
I have a closing thought. So for folks who might be familiar with Jessica, this is her last General Assembly session with Appalachian Voices. She is moving on to the Virginia Conservation Network. We are heartbroken, but also so proud of her. So if you're familiar with Jess, please give her lots of love in the comments.
Emma, thanks so much. Does anyone else have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, we just want to reiterate our thanks to, like Jessica already said, for spending your time with us this evening, for following App Voices, for subscribing to our emails, and for your advocacy for your community priorities. We're just here to help you elevate your voice, elevate your priorities. We get paid to do this. It's the greatest job in the world. So we're here to serve you.
Well, that's it, folks. Thanks so much for a lovely evening together, getting ready for the GA session. We'll send resources soon. Thanks for your time and take care.